Welcome back to Just Giants with Grump and the Cranky Fan, the best damn podcast for the best damn football team. I am your host, the Football Grump, and with me as always is Mike, the Cranky Fan. What's going on, Mike?
Merci, Merveille, or whatever that means in French, because I am here in France right now on my big vacation, but I'm saying hello to you, Grump.
Yeah, so this episode is being recorded a bit in advance. Cranky Fan is on vacation, so we had to record this at the tail end of last week. You guys are viewing this at your regularly scheduled time, and that's why he's not wearing a beret and in a striped shirt, right? Because you're not quite there
European
yet.
Vacation?
Yeah, Big Ben, Parliament. No. But we're here to talk quarterbacks today, and we didn't want to throw off the schedule just for that, and there was no reason not to do advanced work and make this happen. So that's what we're doing. We're making this happen. So let's make it happen. And this is the big kahuna, right? I mean, this is the big question. Daniel Jones, quarterbacks, this team, the future, everything. We have a new head coach. We have a new general manager. We have a whole new front office, coaching staff, everything. But we got last week's news as quarterback, and
but do we?
I don't know. I mean, you could make an argument.
The $1 million question is,
yes,
we don't know that, and a lot of people have made up their minds already about Daniel Jones, and I would be willing to bet the majority of people have made up their minds about Daniel Jones, made up their mind on draft day in 2019.
I would say, of the people that have made up their minds, yeah, I would agree with that.
Yes.
Most of them made up their minds before they even really saw him in Giants blue.
Yes. As we record this in the beginning of March of 2022, is now completely irrelevant when he was drafted, who drafted him, why they drafted him,
sure,
who they drafted instead of someone else, either in 2019 or 2018. None of that matters anymore.
Because we're pivoting now. Yeah, he's here. We're pivoting directions now, and he can be part of that or not.
Right.
I think there is some level of debate here. And the first part of this debate is, do you pick up the fifth-year option?
Mm-hmm. To me, I think we're both in agreement with this, and I think we're in agreement with everybody. The answer is no. I think you want flexibility on this roster and with this salary cap, and something. This is going to be his year. They're running out of time to make excuses. We can say.
Do you think that's unfair? I'm not necessarily disagreeing, but do you think it's unfair that this is his year, this is his chance to shine, is like a whole tear down of the roster?
Well, unfortunately,
life isn't fair.
It's not fair. I mean, He's not going to. Let's put it this way: they're not going to re-sign him again to give him a chance to prove himself. I mean, the clock is kind of running out. This is year 4, and I think we don't need Daniel Jones to be a franchise quarterback at the end of year 4, but we need to see things that he can pick up this offense going forward. He's showing more maturity, running this offense, running the team, continued improvement on ball security, all of these things that you need to see the trends pointing upward to consider the relationship moving on with him or not. I think you roll the dice. I think more signs are kind of pointing that this is probably going to end after this year. But if it doesn't, it's no guarantee. I think people are thinking like, well, you don't do the option, but you could risk losing him after the 4th year. If he's all of a sudden that great,
you can extend him.
You franchise him, or you extend him before. I mean, and also if he's kind of that doesn't mean there's going to be a market out there for all these teams offering him $30-40 million a year. If he's kind of just borderline and you're not really sure what you want to do with him, I can guarantee you most teams are probably not that interested in him either.
Yeah, I mean, that's a pretty good point, right? We assume that if he has a good year, you assume that if he has a baller year that you're just screwed out of keeping him, but says who? I mean, who's to say you wouldn't sign an extension mid-season? Who's to say you don't just franchise tag him and just kick that can down the road until you can work out a deal? Which, by the way, in that instance of kicking the can down the road, that's simply just to get to the years where we have the space under the cap. That's not for any other reason, really.
And think about it from Daniel Jones' standpoint, too. If he's starting to show success this year, Do you think he wants to go to another team and another offensive coordinator and another offense? I mean, he's had what?
No, but I mean, I think he wants another contract with more money. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, but I'm saying, let's put it this way. Again, if the Giants don't think he's the answer, I can pretty much guarantee you that almost every other team feels the same way.
Oh,
he's not going to be signed to be somebody else's starting quarterback. So his most
well,
likely.
I mean, here's the thing: is that if he has a baller year this year, let's just say, right? Mm-hmm. And we're in this situation where the franchise tag is on the table and all this stuff is going on. Do you think he wants to stay here at that point, or do you think he wants to just get the fuck out of here?
Stay.
Because players hate the franchise tag.
Yeah, but the franchise tag is a placeholder until you sign. You make another deal.
Well, maybe. I mean, unless your name is Kirk Cousins.
But here's the thing, though. That's where you're Daniel Jones, and that's where you're open to negotiating. They may hate the franchise tag, but it's for 1 year. He's going to get a significant raise over what he's getting now for the franchise tag.
Oh, yeah.
And it's really kind of on him if he wants to extend and go out. If he wants to roll the dice after that 1 year, he better play even better than he did in 2022, because he's probably not going to get that money on the open market again.
Yeah, I guess so. So why wouldn't you franchise tag him? Is there like a specific thing with Daniel Jones? Or not franchise tag. Offer the 5th-year option. Is it strictly because of the state of the franchise, or is it him?
I think it's him, and also I just think that again, this goes back to being unfair to Daniel Jones, but I think, how much evaluation time do you need? If he's, let's say things are relatively good. Like, let's say the offense, we get an offensive lineman in the draft. The offensive line is relatively healthy, plays better than it was last year, not significantly great. Our offensive weapons are relatively healthy. Kenny Golladay plays 15 games. Kadarius Toney plays 15 games. Saquon Barkley is back to health, and is 1,000-yard rusher. Everything is
That's not even relative. That's pretty damn good.
Okay, so let's say that Saquon Barkley's functional, and let's just say, things are aligned in the right direction for him.
Yeah, I get you.
And,
an uncharacteristically fortuitous year.
Yeah.
With Golladay and Toney playing 15 games and Barkley being pretty functional. But that's also, it's like, it could be a fluke year,
All right, but still, if everything is relatively good, you're giving him the best opportunity to succeed. Right. And again, I don't need to see 50 touchdowns and 3 picks and a QBR, quarterback rating of 187. You need to see that this guy can be good. And to me, it's too much of a gamble for 2 years. We haven't seen enough to really prove it yet. So I just think you play it by ear. And again, if you have that franchise tag in your back pocket, you pay it then.
Yeah, I agree. What's frustrating is that I think, and we've discussed this on the show before, so I'm not going to go into crazy detail, but in the few games in the early-ish of last year, that Week 2 game against Washington, that Saints game especially, even, moments in the week before, when things were looking right for him, when guys were playing, when he had half of an offensive line, he showed the progress, kind of exactly where I wanted to see it. And like even that Week 2 game against Washington, they lost and whatever, but most of that game we were bitching about the defense and the Darius Slayton drop, and you know what I mean. Mm-hmm. Like, Daniel Jones played his ass off in that game, and I remember commending him. He's just like, Nick Gates went out on basically that first drive or whatever, and he's up there setting all the protections and the snaps coming out at 1 second left or double zeros on the clock, and he's still slinging it, and they stayed competitive in that game. He looked like he was progressing the way we were hoping in those flashy incidents. Those incidents were so few and far between because the roster got decimated so goddamn immediately, right, that it's just not enough for me to just to hitch my wagon to that now. That's really it.
Or to toss it aside.
or to toss it aside. I mean, there's no reason to throw that away. You come in here as a GM and you see this dumpster fire, and you're like, well, who could succeed here? You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So if you see any semblance of a guy getting success, and he's stuck under contract in a situation where cutting him doesn't help, by the way, what's the incentive? Just might as well roll.
The Giant fan doesn't want to hear this, but
sure. I mean, I don't even like saying it.
Yeah, but you know something? This is not a year we're worrying about record. I said this when we talked about, my plan to rebuild this roster. When we talked about our way to
set a timetable for when we should be expecting things.
Exactly, and that timetable is not this year. So, if I'm not overly concerned with wins and losses in 2022, I want to play him out and give him every opportunity. The big things that were the big bugaboos against him, turnovers. He's done if you look at the numbers, he's done a much better job.
Yeah, and as a disclaimer, some of that has to do with the conservative offense that we were running, but not all of it. All of it. I mean, if you watch the film, he's holding onto the ball better. He moves the pocket a little bit better, and he's throwing. The interceptions, I would say, are mostly down because they took away all gunslinger mentality from him. Mm-hmm. But the fumbles, I would argue, is fully corrected by him.
Mm-hmm. I mean, the big thing we're going to be concerned about is, can the guy stay healthy? Mm-hmm. I mean, he's had a variety of injuries in a variety of different ways and variety of parts to his body, where that's a pretty big concern. And to me, that is as much of a concern if I want to give him either the fifth-year option or even going forward, as I do for his play on the field.
I would agree with that. And I don't mean specifically the neck. I just mean in general. His health is a friggin' problem. Mm-hmm. So on top of the fact that, it's not like he's out there with a bad offensive line and making it all happen by himself. I mean, he's back there getting killed like most people would. So he's not Superman and getting hurt. He's getting hurt and handling it like a guy would. Right.
So, again, I think we're not worrying about the playoffs this year. I think we're all realistic about that. So we are not a quarterback away from making the playoffs. You play the guy. Yeah. You give him every opportunity to succeed. They're going to build an offense around his strengths, his comfort level, what he likes to do, what the strengths of the weapons they built around him, how good this offensive line is going to be. And you could see, is this a guy we can work with or not? And if they make the decision, after a year, if he only plays 8 games because he's hurt again, your decision is kind of made for you.
Kind of, yeah.
If he plays 16 games, 15 games, and he's they're going to move on.
Yeah, exactly. And there's no incentive to stay at that point.
Right. If he really shows signs of development from this year, from last year, or from week 16, from week 1, they're probably going to keep him. Now, that doesn't mean he's automatically going to get, an 8-year, $175 million contract or some blockbuster one. I think it's, he doesn't have them over a barrel like he thinks he does, or maybe his agent thinks he does. Because looking at my crystal ball, this team is probably going to suck this year and probably going to have a very high draft pick. So if they want to make a move in the draft, they'll be able to pick up a high quality prospect for it. So I think they're doing the right thing with him. They're saying all the right things in the offseason. They are committed to him this year, a year where, again, with no playoffs really to hope for, you give him every opportunity to succeed and to showcase what he can do. It's like the Senior Bowl for a year for him to prove himself.
In a way, yeah. I think on this day, March, 3rd today? Mm-hmm. So far, I think they're handling it exactly how I would. I don't know if that's the best way, but it's the way I would do it. So in my head, it's the best way. But it remains to be seen. We're still early on right now. Mm-hmm. We are in a situation now where, this is a good spot to pivot from here. Mm-hmm. We're talking about his health, right? And one of the big glaring problems that is pretty consistent, he's hurt a lot. We need someone that's going to come in and have to handle a couple games, right? Mm-hmm. That's just like a given at this point. His backup needs to do that. But Mike Glennon is gone, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Jake Fromm, I believe, is also gone. So they brought in Davis Webb, but that's already kind of been told that that's not really a backup. That's going to be more an Alex Tanney role. That's a QB in the QB room kind of role. And that's what he wants, Davis Webb. He's trying to do the path to coach thing.
And before we move on, let's, Mike Glennon, everybody's like, that's the worst backup quarterback we've ever seen. And he quite possibly was.
He was pretty bad, but
the thing was, he wasn't that bad the year before.
No. Quite. I actually do want to point out, because Bobby Skinner did like a really interesting. He had career lows like across the board. That's not him when he got here. He either got hurt or this offense was so bad. And
let's think of the other things too. Those final couple of games that he played, we had a interim offensive coordinator.
No, right? Kinda even. It was Joe Judge and Freddie Kitchens.
Right. So we didn't even have an offensive coordinator. We had another guy calling plays. After
weird
the original
collaborative effort thing.
Right. We had an offensive line that was missing at any stage 3 to 4 starters who should be starting. Kadarius Toney was pretty much gone the end of the season. Kenny Golladay was in and out. Saquon Barkley was a shell of himself. Everything that could have possibly gone wrong for Mike Glennon around him, as well as how he played. And he also played like a guy, like you said, might have been hurt at some point.
But also Daniel Jones was like the last one to get hurt. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, like by the time Daniel Jones got hurt, things had already fallen apart. I mean, they were already pretty much beyond repair by the time Jones was getting hurt in the Dallas game.
They already fired Jason Garrett.
Yeah.
When he got hurt.
Yeah. And those first 2 games before he got hurt, they won both of them.
Right. So, it's unfortunate that Mike Glennon's going to be remembered by Giant fans as probably the worst quarterback in team history, but, let's move on from him.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we're doing here. So they're going to have to. Davis Webb is not going to be that first guy off the bench. I really don't think so. That's really not what it's indicated. He's kind of trying to do the fast track. He's trying to be Mike Kafka, I guess, right? Like he's trying to get that fast track, real young QB coach.
I'm thinking like what Brian Schottenheimer was when he was at Florida. He was, he was the third string quarterback behind Eric Kressler and Danny Werfel, but there was never really anticipation of him ever playing. It was, you are going to learn how to be a coach, and you're going to learn by holding the clipboard as a quarterback from that perspective. So I think that's what they're trying to do here at Davis Webb.
Yeah, which leaves a vacancy here. So, I mean, the Giants are now at a position where they can fill that vacancy with a free agent veteran or a draft pick. And it's a new GM, so both things truly are on the table. And that free agent veteran, by the way, may be somebody that pushes for a job. It may be somebody that is just going to back up Daniel Jones. Or it may be something else, just further down the line.
Yeah, so what I did was I kind of went through the list of all the available free agents, and I kind of categorized them into 3 different groupings. One, free agents that we're not going to touch. They're too expensive or they have issues that we don't want to touch. That's category 1. Category 2 are free agents that would bring in, that would legitimately push Daniel Jones for playing time. If Daniel Jones is playing poorly, this guy could come in and replace them. Or if Daniel Jones gets hurt, he could be someone who comes right in.
Finishes out the season.
And finishes out the season, and it doesn't completely fall off the cliff. Or free agents that are,
just
relatively cheap.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're purely are backups. They're never really going to challenge for a starting job. If you need them to come in for a game or 2, fine. But if it's, if Daniel Jones gets hurt in week 9, he's out for the year, the season's kind of over anyway. So those type of guys. So in category 1, I have identified 3 quarterbacks that to me are just either too expensive or not in our plans. Ryan Fitzpatrick, Andy Dalton, and Cam Newton.
I feel like we have to talk about Ryan Fitzpatrick literally every year because he's a free agent like every year.
He's a free agent every year. He plays somewhere for the first month is fantastic. What's the over-under every year for the term Fitzmagic?
Yeah.
Trending. It's usually by week 2. And then by week 5, he's
either hurt or he's pulled.
Fitztragic.
Yeah.
So,
although I will say is he not the most lucrative NFL player of all time? I mean, I think he's taken money from 20 of 32 teams at this point. I don't think any other player has really acquired more money from more teams than he has.
That's true. He made $10 million last year with Washington. He will be 40 years old when the season starts.
And also, did he play a game last year with Washington?
Did he get hurt in week 1? Or?
I don't even think he either got hurt in week 1 or in the summer. Because when we faced them Thursday night for week 2, and he didn't play. I can't remember.
Let's see.
Either way, I mean, Ryan Fitzpatrick to me has been a hands-off guy for the exact reason we talked about with the Fitztragic thing. Completely takes over the position. Everywhere he goes, he earns the starting job for that Fitzmagic and then falls apart with the Fitztragic. It just screws up the whole dynamic. He'll never just be a backup. And
he played one game and had played 16 snaps.
Oh, yeah, so he got hurt immediately.
Yes.
Wow, that's incredible. Yeah, so he's been hands off for a long time, but now I mean he's almost 40, and $10 million is we're trying to cut 40 here, so we're not trying to add another 25% of that back on.
Andy Dalton, same story, made $10 million last year. That's not the neighborhood we want to buy a house in. For sure.
I would also say that Andy Dalton isn't even as good as Ryan Fitzpatrick.
No, he's not. And then Cam Newton, I put in this list. He only made $6 million last year, but he is shot.
He is a far cry from the 2015 version that we know.
Exactly. So that's category 1. Category 2, these are quarterbacks. Again, if they brought him in, they're going to provide either very serious competition for Daniel Jones, or you're bringing him with an eye that he might replace them mid-season.
Well, before we get into that idea, I just want to clarify. Do you think any of the people in this group would be here for more than just the initial year?
No, because I
agree with you.
Because I think if they're going to be looking to bring in a guy to challenge Daniel Jones, they are so uncommitted on Daniel Jones that they are going to go for a franchise quarterback in the draft. None of these guys are franchise quarterbacks going forward. The youngest one in this group is 28 years old, and we'll talk about the two of those guys shortly, but none of these guys fit in anybody's long-term plans as a starter.
I think I agree with you.
Yeah. So this list, Tyrod Taylor and Jameis Winston made $5.5 million last year. Jameis Winston coming off major surgery. Jameis Winston is also garbage. He is a guy at Florida State who was accused of rape. It got settled out of court. I'm always going to throw that in there. So, but all that aside, Jacoby Brissette, once a Gator, always a Gator. $5 million last year with Miami. Teddy Bridgewater from Denver, $4.4 million.
And he was hurt too last year, right?
He was hurt as well. Marcus Mariota from the Raiders, $3.5 million. Joe Flacco, who was with the Jets, $3.5 million. And flavor of the day, Mitchell Trubisky for $2.5 million. And I was actually kind of surprised of all of the guys on this list. The youngest guy is Mitchell Trubisky. It seems like he's older than he actually is, doesn't he?
Because I think we gave up on him almost immediately. Look, I understand that we're talking about a backup position now and not drafting a guy and hoping for him to be the franchise, the face of the franchise or whatever. But I don't even think there were this many people. The Giant fans that are clamoring for Mitch Trubisky, I don't think there were this many people in the nation clamoring for him to be drafted. I don't have really a big problem with Mitchell Trubisky being a backup. I got to be honest, but I would say I would pull Joe Flacco from this list and push him down to the third tier. Mm-hmm. Joe Flacco, I think, is truly shot, and he's also pushing 40 as well. And he dive bombed off a cliff. He had that insane year in 2012 where in the postseason he just became somebody else, frankly, because he never really followed up much after that. And it really. You say this all the time too. These guys lose it; they lose it fast.
You're done.
And he looks done to me. I don't know if he'll. Mm-hmm. He might get signed just because of his name, and he won a Super Bowl at one point. But I think it would only be for that. Nothing he did last year.
Jacoby Brissette seems like a guy. It's like the thought of Jacoby Brissette. He's always seemed to be in the right place at the right time to get a contract. Mm-hmm. Whereas always, it's like the prospect of Jacoby Brissette. You know, he's on the bench, New England. It's like, oh, you know, somebody should spend a lot of money for this guy to be the starter. And then for, you know, whatever reason he gets hurt or something and he's out and somebody else signs him. He plays, you know, plays a couple of games for Miami. It's like, oh, Jacoby Brissette. But have you ever had a Jacoby Brissette moment in the NFL? Like, what's his signature moment?
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't think he really adds anything that we want. It's almost like his highlights come when the whole play comes together. It's the right play call for the right defense, and he's looking in the right direction, and his release happens to be good that time. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Everything with him seems fortuitous. It doesn't seem. I don't know. It doesn't seem like it's coordinated or navigating around any issues. It's just when things luck out. I mean, if I'm bringing in a guy right here, and I understand the concept that these guys might challenge him or might end up finishing the year when they, you know, week 9, they've just decided they've had it with Daniel Jones and we're going to finish the year with one of these guys. I would say of those guys, I'm partial to Tyrod Taylor. And the reason why is because he's worked with a lot of young quarterbacks. He's lost his job to them just about every time. No, but seriously, I think he does a good job of just coming to work, and he's a good, you know, learn by watching me kind of guy. I think when he goes in games, he's functional. He does pretty well. I don't know if he's gonna be offered the $5.5 million that he got last year. If he can be had for something like $4 million or less, I would prefer to be shooting that fish in that barrel.
Let me ask you something. There's a lot of pressure, obviously, on Daniel Jones this year. Mm-hmm. Is it in his best interest to bring someone in to, quote-unquote, challenge him, to put more pressure on him, or is it better to say, you're the guy? I mean, I know they're saying in public now, it's like Daniel Jones, our starting quarterback, blah, blah, blah. That's off-season, you know, coach speak. But if you want to give him is it in his best interest to constantly be looking over his shoulder and being pushed like that? I know, some people say competition's better, but
I think there is a distinction between the two kinds of guys in tier 2 here. Like I don't think, like, Mitchell Trubisky, to me, that pushes him. That's a young guy who, you know, is a former first round pick. You know, he's just now coming out of, you know, his second organization. Where he didn't really even get a chance to see the field. So who knows? Maybe he just needs to be with the right people. Tyrod Taylor is 32. He's been the guy that was there for Baker Mayfield, for Justin Herbert, I think. There's a precedent here where when he's signed, you can tell Daniel Jones, like, this guy is good at working with young quarterbacks. Listen to him. You know, work with him. Do the drills with him. You know, there's a way you can sell that to Daniel Jones where it doesn't feel like a threat, even though it potentially could be.
So he's really a tier 3 quarterback who gets paid like a tier 2 quarterback.
Because he has the ability to come in and not fuck things up. I mean, there is a huge difference between McCoys of the... Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, let's talk about tier 3 then. So when you get down to the tier 3, these are quarterbacks which I feel... they're not really going to challenge you for the starting role, but they can. If they have to play for a couple of games, you feel okay that they can at least, you know, prevent a catastrophe like what happened last year. And this list includes Chad Henny, Brandon Allen, A.J. McCarron, Geno Smith, and once a giant, always a giant, Colt McCoy.
Yeah, I mean,
these guys are making about, you know, anywhere from a little over $1.5 million to about $1.2 million in that ballpark.
These are the affordable guys. These are the guys like Colt McCoy. He's the guy you bring in when you're like, Daniel Jones is our guy. We need a backup quarterback.
In hindsight,
when they
made a
him,
mistake last year. They should have just kept him.
I think that's a fair assessment. I think when they signed Colt McCoy at that time, knowing what we knew about Daniel Jones was a was a good signing. Now, knowing what we know about Daniel Jones, I don't think I would sign Colt McCoy. I mean, if he's going to have to play like 6 games, 5 games, Colt McCoy might win 2. And it's going to depend on the opponent.
Yeah, we're also talking about a team that plays 6 games might win 2 anyway.
I'm saying in a vacuum, if Daniel Jones is just the focus of what we're talking about here, he's not going to come in and win jack. So, let's just pretend that we're an 8-8 roster, and that's kind of what we're expecting right now. 8-8, and if everyone stays healthy, maybe we'll 10 wins and we're in the playoffs, whatever. No way. I mean, at this point, knowing what we know now about Daniel Jones, if he's out, it's going to be for more than a handful of snaps, a series, a quarter. It's going to be 2.5 games.
And to this point also, if Daniel Jones was an established franchise quarterback and this team was a playoff team, it may make sense to have a guy like, Jacoby Brissette or Trubisky or someone who is a higher, because you don't want to ruin your season by, if you're a 10-win team and all of a sudden you go down and have a Colt McCoy, that could really kill your season.
Sure. Happened to us last year.
We're not even near that position right now to be like, well, we better have a very, very quality backup. We just want someone to prevent catastrophe, to prevent 2021 from happening again.
So are you in the tier 3 bucket here of the Hennys, Allens, McCarron, Smith, McCoy?
I am, for 2 reasons. One, like I was alluding to before, I don't want any more pressure on Daniel Jones. He has enough already this year. He's fighting for his job with the Giants. He's really fighting for his starting quarterback career, because if he fails this year, he's not a starting quarterback anymore in this league. And second, my long-term plan for this team, and I've said it 100 times, I don't care about wins and losses. And something, if Daniel Jones goes down again in week 6 or week 7, I kind of want to lose. I want the best possible draft pick, because that draft pick is going for a quarterback. So, something, I'd rather almost save the money that you're spending on a backup quarterback and use that for other resources that we can apply towards longer term solutions for this team. So I would go more towards that lower second tier, or I would just go ahead and keep Davis Webb and make him my backup.
I mean, you make a pretty compelling point. I mean, right? What's the point in spending the money? We're not winning anything anyway. These guys are here for a year. Part of me also is like, if Daniel Jones goes down in week 3, let's just say, we're not even evaluating the rest of the talent on the roster at that point. That's my worry with getting a Chad Henny. I mean, Chad Henny, I don't even know if he can make right decisions for one whole game or even half a game. You know what I mean? So I feel exactly what you're saying, and I think you might have to suss out where the best bang for your buck is. And, I'm okay, I guess, shelling out $3 million, $4 million for a backup quarterback that's competent. If you can get them for less, we're in a, we're here for the sale, the clearance.
Let's keep in mind too that, these salary numbers I gave were last year. So
right.
Is Jacoby Brissette getting $5 million next year? Is there a market for him at $5 million? Maybe not. Is there a market for Teddy Bridgewater next year with the injuries and stuff at $4.4 million? Maybe not. So, just because that's what they got before doesn't mean they're going to get again.
So does that bring us to the draft? I mean, that's kind of where we're at with free agency. I mean, that's the market. It's not pretty. There's nothing really sexy about any of it.
No,
but nothing's sexy when you have no cash.
I mean, this is, again, even if we had money in the cap, this is the what do we have with Daniel Jones year. And I don't think this team, if they had the same record they did last year but had tons of cap space, they're not going to spend a lot on backup quarterback with all the other needs that they need. I think, as we pivot towards the draft, we have to first make that, all important question. How likely is this front office going to draft a quarterback this year, given the major needs this team has, particularly offensive line, edge rusher, linebacker, secondary, things that need to be solidified and
yeah,
rebuilt.
I mean, those things need solutions. You know what I mean? Like Daniel Jones, the quarterback position, we don't know if we even need a solution right now. I mean, he may be the solution. I don't. Gun to your head right now, is Daniel Jones on the roster in 2023?
No.
Okay, yeah. I mean, that's kind of how I feel too. I don't think this is going to be a very good team next year. He's not even going to have an opportunity to show that he improved or looks better in this system. The only way I think he returns in 2023 is if the draft pool is completely dry and he showed enough progress and will be attained for cheap because nobody else wants him. You know, that's the only thing I can see. And even then, that's kind of a stretch. Well, actually, no, it's not. I mean, I think he could prepare enough, and if the draft pool is empty.
I think he can show enough over a 17-week season and all the time they spend with him in, OTAs, off-season, preseason, regular season, in the film room, in practice, in games, that they can say that this coaching staff that's had him for a year can say, I want to continue with this guy.
Yeah, I think I was agreeing with myself, and then I took that one sentence off a cliff there. Yeah, I think he can play his way onto it, but like I said, gun to my head, I don't think that's going to happen because I think we're going to be too bad for him to show the progress he needs to show to earn that cheaper whatever. And I don't think he's going to be balling to earn that franchise tag like we were saying at the top of the show.
Exactly. And I think, again, you're buying time. I think that decision just buys time to make the team around the next quarterback better. I mean, if you are drafting the quarterback of the future this year, you are delaying the progress of rebuilding this offensive line. You may be delaying the progress of getting your edge rusher. You may be delaying the progress of, maybe you take that draft pick and you're going to trade down and trade around and get more draft picks for this year and next year to help with this overall rebuild. I think you're punting on that decision for a year, but I think the overall health of the roster is increased by it. And
Completely agree. Because like we're saying, Daniel Jones may be the solution to the Daniel Jones maybe problem.
Yeah.
But we know for sure that the solutions on the offensive line, Andrew Thomas is the only one that fits. On the edge rushing, Azeez Ojulari is the only one that fits. Quincy Roche only because he's really cheap, to be honest. Inside linebacker, we know these things. We don't have the solution on the roster. That's where we should be fixing, where we know we need solutions. Right now, there's so many other spots that it's not worth it to be like maybe fixing maybe problems.
You're improving the chances of the next quarterback having success by building the groundwork now.
Yeah, 100%. And those things need to change, and they got to change fast. But that does bring us to the draft because that's one more place where we could get a quarterback. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility.
Oh no, it's possible. I mean, gun to my head, no.
Gun to my head, no, but that's only because I did the work. I didn't want to say that until I'm being serious. I'm not. I didn't mean to like.
Gun to your head isn't definitive, so if it's not definitive, we might as well talk about.
How the fuck? Yeah, well, yeah, I guess you're right. But yeah, I didn't want to. I didn't want to say anything without having actually truly watched these guys. And I avoided quarterback because I didn't think it was going to be a thing. But if I watched this and I was blown away by something that maybe I hadn't seen before, I'd be like, these people talking about this guy, they might be right. But I didn't see that. So right now, by the way, we're talking, I don't think the quarterbacks did anything at the combine yet. It's March 3rd. I think they just showed up and did their measurements and medical.
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, so while we're talking about this is pre-combine. So you're hearing this after they've already done some drills, so this might be kind of irrelevant as far as my opinion on them. But this is based on film, which I always take more to heart than combine anyway. But I do want to go through the guys, and there's not a lot, but I'm going to go through all the guys that I did watch.
So before you get started with that, do you think it's more, if they decide to go quarterback this year, do you think that it's like with the first pick, like the first round pick, or you think they're going to try to like draft somebody like in the 4th or 5th round in for a development project? Or is it like, we're just waiting, we're going to punt till next year on quarterback?
I don't think it serves any purpose to get a mid-round thing here. I think in general, mid-round quarterbacks that have success, and I'm not talking about Russell Wilson because, he fell only because of his baseball uncertainty. Well, not only, but mainly because of his baseball uncertainty and stuff like that. But the guys like Kirk Cousins, who's a third-round draft pick, they're so rare. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, you get those guys because you can. Right? You're like, just in case, let's get this guy. Or we're going to need a backup. Maybe he can develop into a backup.
Or we draft him and he could be an asset that we can trade.
Sure, anything. Any of those things.
We're not in that position
absolutely. Yet. But most of those draft picks, they pan out to be nothing at all. There's a very, very few that pan out to be the choice. You know what I mean? Like the Kirk Cousins of the world. And we can bitch about Kirk Cousins all the time. But dude's a starter. Right? I mean, like, getting a starter out of the third or fourth round in the draft is pretty nuts. So would you
rather have right now Daniel Jones or Kirk Cousins? Forget salaries, just straight up.
Do I have to forget age and ceiling and potential?
Right now. Just for right now. I'm picking sides. I'm on the playground. I'm picking who's my quarterback.
I don't know. Cousins, I guess.
Okay, so you're proving my point then. But
that I don't fucking know?
No. Oh. It's like we goof on Kirk Cousins, but he's a starting quarterback in this league.
100%, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I would take Kirk Cousins right now over Daniel Jones.
But I mean, it's tough because, again, like I've seen things from Daniel Jones I really like. Not recently, but those Shermer years, I saw a lot of stuff downfield that I really liked. Mm-hmm. So I'm not super down low on Jones, but I'm trying to be realistic about him.
Yeah.
So let's be realistic about draft guys.
Okay.
I'm gonna try and rifle through these, and then I'm just gonna go through what I saw on them. And we'll take them one by one. So the first guy I checked out was from Pitt, Kenny Pickett, who's actually a New Jersey kid, but from way down south where they root for the Eagles. So it doesn't really, we don't claim that here. This dude is 6'3", 220 pounds. He's a pro-style quarterback. He operates mostly out of the shotgun, almost entirely, I would say. Not much of a design runner, but he is a decent mover. As far as navigating the pocket, it needs a lot of work. He tends to drift rather than find escape lanes. He also tends to over-panic, but he's decent at feeling the initial pressure. He gets a little flighty if under high amounts of pressure, panics when out of progressions, and immediately looks to escape the pocket even if it's not necessary. Mentality, he can have a gunslinger mentality at Brett Favre levels at times, that's not a compliment. Mostly, he's on top of safe decisions, but can sometimes make some really careless all-or-nothing kinds of throws and in really strange moments as well. He's above average at finding weaknesses pre-snap. This is kind of where he shines, is a lot of the pre-snap stuff and the intellect stuff, I would say. He's good at exploiting those things. He can sometimes get locked into that pre-snap decision when it's not there and just kind of wait for it to happen when it's not gonna. But otherwise, he's pretty advanced in this area, and same with setting some protections. I think he works through his progressions really well. I think he needs to make the decision a little faster on that third and fourth option, but that's pretty advanced in that area. The arm, though. The accuracy is inconsistent at best. There's a general lack of ability to lead receivers, which was more prevalent in 2020, but still lurked in 2021. But he can sometimes make very smart decisions with ball placement, and other times it looks like the effort level is just trying to get it near the wide receiver, and I don't understand that. And I would say his arm strength is average to above average, nothing cannon, nothing crazy, nothing to write home about. I have no idea how much of this is accounted for in his small hands. I just figured I'd mention them. But his mechanics, upper body mechanics, they look pretty good. It's his feet. His feet are inconsistent. There's some instances of crossing feet, sometimes some extra baby steps. He has this super annoying trait of doing fadeaways from very distant pressures, not necessary, instead of gathering his feet and stepping into the throw.
How much of that is coaching and how much of that is just that's what he is?
I don't know. It did look these guys are young, so I expect improvement from year to year no matter what. You know what I mean? So when I say it improved from 2020 to 2021, I don't want to take anything away from that, but also I expect in college the young guys to every year, especially a team like Pitt, which is this is no scrub school. I mean, it's an ACC school.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. My big issue with him is the accuracy is not always tied to his footwork. And that, to me, tells me, like I said, there's a general lack of effort sometimes. It looks like he's just kind of the guy's there, throwing it there. Like, no, dude, you got to throw into a window. You know, this is the NFL now. There's nobody running wide
You
open.
can get away with that in college, but not in the NFL.
100%. And even, I would say he didn't really get away with it all that well at Pitt. There's a lot of times where receivers are fully stopping to catch the ball.
So is he the type of guy you project to be an NFL starter, an above-average NFL starter, and a franchise guy? What do you think?
You know, I thought more highly of him until I watched him, this in depth. I think he's going in the first round. I think he might even be the first quarterback picked. And that should say something because it's going to get worse from here. And this isn't really a super glowing review of Kenny Pickett. So we're looking at another year where I don't know if any of these quarterbacks are really going to pan out. There's not a surefire guy here this year.
I mean, that is kind of, if you're trying to decide, or do you want to cash your chips in now for your quarterback or wait till next year? That's a pretty damning indictment.
Yeah. And what's interesting is the top guys, they're all really different too. So it really is kind of worth exploring because all the guys that I think could go in the first round here, they really do operate in different ways from each other. So the next guy I checked out is, and people love making connections in NFL sports writing. The Ole Miss quarterback, Matt Corral.
Matt Corral.
Yeah.
Once a Gator, never became a Gator. He was a recruit of Jim McElwain, and when he got fired, he decommitted from Florida and went to Ole Miss.
Probably smart because the next head coach was a defensive guy.
After Florida?
Yeah. Or am I?
No, next head coach was Dan Mullen.
Oh, well, oh yeah. Okay, I get the coaches. They flipped
he
through
probably
a couple.
would have. Well, I mean, Dan Mullen or Lane Kiffin. Take your pick on which type of offense you want. They're both very prolific. They both will, have a lot of quarterbacks go to the NFL. So I can't blame him for the decision he made. Yeah.
Yeah. To me, by the way, I think Kenny Pickett is going top 10. I don't really grade him there, but I think that's kind of where he's going to end up going. Matt Corral, I think, is going to fall somewhere after that in anywhere from the 10 to 12. And by where he goes, I don't really grade that way. I grade where I think their talent belongs. So they may go 1 and 2, but I don't think either one of these guys are a 1 and 2.
And then again, the question I asked before is, forget where they're going to fall in the draft. What do you project? Going forward, what is he going to be? Is he a starting quarterback in this league? Is he an above average starting quarterback? Is he a guy who just never plays?
Yeah, I mean, and all these guys, I think 3 of the top 4 guys have potential to be starters, and they probably will start out as starters wherever they wind up. But ultimately, the path of their career, I'm not sure that any of them are going to be starters.
Okay.
Yeah. So Matt Corral, 6'2", 200 pounds. He's a pocket passer, but he has legit running ability. He's a true threat with his legs. In the pocket, he's nimble enough to avoid sacks, but doesn't necessarily navigate the pocket exceptionally. He's just that natural ability. And he uses that natural athleticism and his decent vision, but he can sometimes do way too much. In an instinct to run instead of slide in the pocket and throw, he'll sometimes run directly into pressure and stuff. He's really doing too much. But his decision making, it's really not that bad. He can get locked into some pre-snap read stuff that isn't there and force it, but generally doesn't put the ball in bad places. Kind of often on the safe side. He has he felt
like a very confident guy, just the way he carries himself, even
sure.
The whole thing with playing in the bowl game when he got hurt and he was just like, hey, it happens,
Yeah,
so
and he's coming off a high ankle sprain, by the way.
He plays like he's very confident also, definitely.
I would agree with that. I think he also has a pretty good ability to read and scan the field before the snap to identify weaknesses and blitzes and stuff like that. But I will say that I think he struggles to adjust and work through his progressions when things aren't expected or when they're not open. And he often tries to make up for it by buying time in the pocket and allowing receivers to work their way open or running or something like that. And when he does have time in the pocket, he shows an ability to look off some safeties and stuff like that. He'll pump fake when moving around the pocket too. Accuracy here is generally good and consistent at the first two levels of throwing, but it starts to waver into the wild category when we're throwing deep. But he does have some pretty good arm strength to throw deep and into far corners, and he has some ability to throw darts and also with touch. Overall, I would say that his mechanics are pretty good, too. He holds the ball a little too low for my liking, and I think his base can get a little bit narrow when setting and dropping back, but otherwise his feet are usually doing the right thing. It's one of those things with him, though, is I just... The deep ball accuracy, I just don't know if it's NFL level. I don't know with him.
He reminds me kind of like of those Alabama quarterbacks pre-Tua. Like an A.J. McCarron type coming out of college. Like he can make all
more of a statue, A.J. McCarron?
No, just like the way you described, the accuracy kind of wavered as he hit the deep ball. Mm-hmm. Good on his first and second progressions, and then maybe holds it too long type thing.
My biggest thing with him really is everything you just said. That I could see that parallel. And by the way, I hate doing player comps, and I tried not. I have to pull myself out of it because I'm bad at them. Mm-hmm. But for me, my biggest takeaway is like you said, like that third and fourth progression, things aren't working out right. Even if there's no pressure in his face, he starts to just start wildly moving around, and it's just like, you can chill. You don't need to do that. And I don't know how much of that can be coached out of him. It's not like he came from bad coaching, Mm-hmm. Matt Corral, I think you could even...
He's not a very good head coach, but he's a very good offensive mind and a quarterback whisperer type coach. So, I can see your point for that.
This is going to be the big one we're about to jump into here, and he's probably the most polarizing one, and it's Liberty quarterback Malik Willis, and I do think he's a first-round talent here. But let's get into Malik Willis because this is important. He's 6'1", 220 pounds. That's pretty serious. 220 pounds is 6'1". That's pretty nice. He is legit rare talent, dual threat quarterback with rare natural arm talent and elusiveness and speed. His pocket movement flashes some natural ability to move in the pocket, but it's wildly out of control. And it's not moving in the pocket really if you are no longer in your throwing stance and you're completely scrambling. You are full running, then you're not moving in the pocket. You're just escaping.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Become a runner.
Yeah. Even if you're not trying to run past the line of scrimmage, but you are no longer a passer once you start, you're now perpendicular. It's not, that's got to get worked out of him really badly. Mm-hmm. He's pretty good at sensing pressure initially and moving accordingly, but the movement within the pocket is the issue. Getting out of the pocket, he has rare ability to find running lanes and run with speed, with twitch, or put his foot in the ground, honestly, and grind out a finish, which I was surprised to see. He will just run guys over to get 1 yard when he needs that 1 yard. Mm-hmm. Look, the decision-making is horrendous, all right? The throws are often forced. They're often overreactions to pressure, and they create false need to rush, making him easy to bait. His pre-snap reading, it's really hard to tell how in control he is at line of scrimmage, how much is coming from the sideline, and I don't really know the answer. So I would say at best it's average, but I think it's below average. Mm-hmm. When the pocket is under control, he works through his progressions. He uses his legs to extend plays when the progressions yield no results. But again, like I said, using his legs is not using them properly. Seeing the field in general for him is a huge problem. Guys are running wide open. The first play of the first game I watched was against Louisiana Lafayette, and there's a guy like this, and he misses him. Hand in the air, wide open, streaking down the field. So right away, I was like, ay. There's some very easy throws that are missed too because he's waiting for something big to happen downfield, and something perfectly fine 6 to 7 yards down the field is right there, and guys are jumping up and down and waiting. So the decision making, it's got to get worked on. He does have the ability to place the ball well when his mechanics are under control, but like I said, his footwork when he's running around in the pocket and stuff, it's all over the place. But I will say all of his accuracy issues seem to be tied to those mechanics, so correctable. Where he really shines is arm strength. He has the ability to fire a spiral through weather, but he can also place a drop in the bucket, which is fantastic. he has a special ability when he keeps his eyes downfield while escaping the pocket and pressure. He can be electrifying. We're talking about Lamar Jackson light in a lot of ways here. Mechanics are all over the place. The footwork is very inconsistent. Sometimes it's a flat mess. And I don't like how often he brings his back foot up high after every throw, no matter how light or how hard. It's almost like a overreaction.
It's like he's trying to compensate for something. Like
it's like
sure, like he's moving his hip or something, but it's like a hitch, like a baseball swing hitch. Like I want to make sure I'm moving my hip, so I'm doing something like my arm.
Yeah, and I preface this already, but I'm not a genius or anything like that. So maybe it's not that big of a problem, but to me it looks awkward. I have not seen a lot of people do that. Here's my general thing. To me, he looks like a lot less far along than Lamar Jackson was. He doesn't see the field well. His mechanics are everywhere, and he even moves in less refined ways and is slower. I think he's slower. He looks slower. But wait, hang on. He is, however, a smart kid. And he's a hard worker. And since most of his issues are all correctable and teachable, he can develop into something very, very special. But I think he has a longer way to go than Lamar Jackson. And is still, even if he does make the exact same leap, he's less naturally gifted than Lamar Jackson, in my opinion, as well. So at his absolute best, I think his absolute ceiling is still a little under Lamar Jackson. Now, that is not a knock, I guess, right? Like, Lamar Jackson's top 10 quarterback in the league. It's certainly top 15.
MVP last year, wasn't he?
Maybe. I don't know. But either way, Malik Willis can elevate to that level. Right now, which is how I do my grades, I don't grade on ceiling. I acknowledge it. Right now, he doesn't even look like a first-round quarterback. But you can't ignore ceiling with a quarterback, right?
Right.
So, to me, I grade him as top 20 talent.
So, if you're the Giants and you are this front office, are you more concerned about potential ceiling, or you're trying to minimize the potential for a bust when we're this next quarterback that we bring in, if we decide to move on for next quarterback?
Well, I think that if Malik Willis were coming out in the draft exactly as he is, and we are 2 years into this Joe Shane rebuild, and this is the draft class that's coming out, and we've already addressed most of our whatever, and Daniel Jones is on the last year of his deal, whatever. In that instance of this group, I'm taking Malik Willis based on his ceiling. I don't think Matt Corral or Kenny Pickett ever elevate to the level of franchise quarterback. I think Corral probably has a better chance than Pickett, even though he's not as far along as Pickett right now.
So would a team like, let's say the Steelers, for example, Roethlisberger's retiring. Would a team like that be a good pick for someone like him?
It could be.
The infrastructure is around there for him to succeed, and there's a potential for that super high ceiling.
It could be, but I would really try to refrain. And I understand the financial implications of sitting a first-year quarterback, but to me, this kid needs to sit a year. Or at least like the first 10 games of the season. If he ends up closing out the season, then fine. But I think he gets the Mahomes treatment. I have to be.
Or the Trey Lance treatment.
Or the Trey Lance. Well, we don't even know that one for sure. I mean, who knows?
Well, I mean, like he sat. They traded up for the guy and he sat.
Yeah. Well, yeah, fair enough. But, yeah, dude, I would be surprised if Malik Willis has what it. Again, this is pre-combine. I saw improvement, by the way, from 2020 to 2021, and even at the Senior Bowl. So, very coachable. He's a smart, hardworking kid. I tried to outline that as hard as I could because he can elevate. He can do it, and he has by far the highest ceiling here.
So, if Ben
Roethlisberger had one more year, I would say the Steelers would be an absolutely perfect place for him to go.
So, this is going to be my next kind of follow-up to the Steeler question was, would he be better suited to be on a team that's drafted more like Pittsburgh or a team like, let's say, Jacksonville or Houston bad, and just say, we're going to get him and we'll build around him, or it would be better off with a team that has that structure around him, like for a guy like him that has to kind of, mature more and develop more?
I mean, Jacksonville, taking out the fact that they have Trevor Lawrence, whatever, but I understand as a
quality
franchise,
of team, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think anyone really survives those places. That's the circle of hell. No quarterback really comes out of there alive.
So while he may not make as much money if he was drafted, let's say, 15th as opposed to 3rd, it might be to the best interest in his career to be drafted a little lower. Does that make sense?
The same way would be for maybe Aaron Rodgers. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Anybody who avoids Cleveland, you know what I mean? So I guess, was that Peyton Manning?
Well, Peyton Manning was with he was drafted by the Colts.
Right.
But there wasn't no.
What do you mean? Didn't Cleveland pick 2nd and they picked Tim Couch? In 99?
No. Cleveland, that was the first overall pick. Ryan Leaf was the 2nd pick.
Right. Ryan Leaf. Sorry, I had.
Yeah, he went to San Diego.
So that's my thing. No, wait. Yeah, wait.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah, Couch was a different draft. Couch was later.
Yeah. Well, whatever. Everyone that gets drafted in Cleveland falls apart. Even the great Baker Mayfield, right? and Johnny Money or whatever.
Hey, okay, so let me ask you something. I asked the question before. Rather Baker Mayfield or Daniel Jones right now?
I don't know. Does that even matter?
That's just hypothetically, because we're throwing out names throughout this show.
I would rather have Daniel Jones. I like Daniel. Daniel Jones has a skill set that Baker Mayfield does not have. Both guys are underperforming where they should be. Daniel Jones has deep ball accuracy that's very, very good. Not that Baker Mayfield's isn't good, but he has that. I think his attitude is a little bit more in the right place than Baker Mayfield's. I think Baker Mayfield is a prick, by the way. I think he's a dickhead. And
Baker
also,
Mayfield's had better talent to work with than Daniel Jones ever did too, and done less with it.
Yeah, and Daniel Jones has running ability that Baker Mayfield just simply doesn't have.
The answer is
his face, Daniel Jones.
The answer is Daniel Jones. Yeah. Yes.
But both are equally underperforming at this point right now.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to quickly run through another one. UNC quarterback Sam Howell, mainly because he surprised me a little bit. 6'1", 220 pounds, pocket passer with some escapability. And speaking of Baker Mayfield, when he's running, he kind of looks like him. He gets those tough, gritty yards sometimes. In the pocket, he feels pressure pretty well, but doesn't navigate the pocket with any sort of grace. He steps into throws, knowing that he's going to get creamed, though. So that's pretty tough, and I like that. I have a really soft spot for that in my heart. Mostly he makes smart and safe decisions, but often a beat too late on them to be fully effective, and he's not often very daring. He appears to be average at reading defenses pre-snap. He works through his progressions on beat and reads the field pretty well, but not often throwing into bad choices. He also doesn't immediately trust his eyes and throws a bit late. I don't know if that's coachable or if that's just in his nature to not want to make mistakes. He has a tendency to stare down throws, and he has minimal pump and head fakes except when he's running. Generally speaking, he's pretty accurate with ball placement. Any issues tend to be tied to his footwork, which again is correctable. Downfield accuracy is especially good in my opinion. I think he throws a very pretty deep ball. Strength, though, excellent touch when needed on the over-the-shoulder throws.
So we mentioned quarterbacks from Liberty, Ole Miss, North Carolina, and we're talking about some really good coaches.
Yeah.
And the common theme for these guys are a lot of things that this could be correctable. This could be coached out. So,
well, they're young. That's why. Those really good coaches, they only have them from their former. They're coaching out a lot of high school stuff too, and they're also trying to win games.
So when you're saying like the footwork and you're not comparing it to other guys, their peers. You're saying more towards what needs to be for the NFL.
I'm talking about the NFL. When I talk about the draft guys, I talk about how they're going to do in their first year and things like that. And I'll say that how it's. Where they get drafted is how they stack up against their peers. You know what I mean? And how I rank them. That's all stacked up against their peers.
Right.
But at the end of the day, I don't really care who the best in the NCAA is in 2021 at whatever position. I care about what they're going to do at the next level.
Right. And I'm saying,
that's how I'm answering it.
I'm comparing footwork. Like, this guy's got the best footwork I've seen compared to this guy, but it's your projections are going forward to, like you said, for year one. Okay, I got you.
Correct. Yeah. And speaking of his footwork or whatever, his mechanics, he holds the ball a little too low. He releases at the proper height, though. So I think that's leading to an exaggerated and lengthy windup, which is never really good. But that's easily correctable. I mean, that's just, you got to hold the ball higher. I mean, and that happens with a lot of college kids. They hold it a little too low, especially the guys who move. Mm-hmm. I don't know. His footwork, I don't know. I just don't get the sense from Sam Howell that if it's the fourth quarter and there's a minute left that he's going to lead any team down the field to do anything.
They underachieved North Carolina. I mean, they were.
Well, and when they did well,
top 10.
It was kind of the running backs that did a lot of the legwork.
Yeah, I mean, him and Matt Corral were kind of the two, like, before the season started. Like, these are going to be the two best quarterbacks in the NFL this year, in college this year, rather.
Mm.
And Howell, I think he was a much bigger disappointment that, they lost some games early on. He kind of lost the spotlight, as the season went on because they dropped out of the top 25 and he kind of lost, perception of him.
Steam.
Really. Yeah.
But I mean, he flashed more, and I was way down on him because I had watched him a lot in 2020 because I was watching the running backs, I was watching De'Ami Brown, and I was just generally watching a lot of UNC tape, and I was like, man, this kid sucks. Like, I'm not into, like, because I'm watching De'Ami Brown, and I'm like, he would have like 15 more touchdowns if he didn't suck. If Sam Howell could throw the fucking ball. But now that I'm watching him very specifically, and it's a year later, he may have underachieved, but he still surprised me with his ability. He was a little bit further along than I really expected. Okay. Those are all the guys that I could see going in the first round, and I could see the possibility of Sam Howell going in the first round, but my projection for him is round 2.
So the bottom line with these guys is that there's nobody who really off the page wowed you to the point of, I got to reconsider, if the Giants are looking at, this tackle or this edge rusher. No. From what I've seen on tape, they need to go in this direction with a quarterback.
Nobody blew me away. Like I said, the best thing that looked good was the ceiling and the potential for Malik Willis. And I just, in my humble opinion, his best destination is somewhere where they have a quarterback for 1 to 2 more years and they can let him sit and develop. The Giants could let him sit and develop for a year, but they just have so many holes.
Too many needs.
It's one of those things where, I don't know, I guess it depends on how far he's dropping. You know what I mean? Like, Lamar Jackson himself went like 24th or something like that, right? And I'm saying that at best, this kid will be slightly worse than Lamar Jackson. And by all accounts, he should be going less than that, right?
Well,
but I mean, that's not really how it works. But
you mean slightly worse where he's drafted, or how he'll be in the NFL?
How he'll be in the NFL. I think at his best, he'll still be a little bit worse than Lamar Jackson.
Hey, if he's slightly worse than a guy who was MVP.
Exactly, but that is his full projected ceiling, and that guy was drafted 24th. When he came out, he's far. I think he's further behind where Lamar Jackson was when he came out of the NCAA. He played at Louisville. I mean, he played against better competition, and he looked better on film than Malik Willis did playing against Troy or whatever.
Well, the best he play was Louisiana, which was a ranked team. But come on,
I mean, they played Ole Miss. They also played Syracuse. Yeah, which defensively this year, Syracuse is pretty good. The last couple of years, I as a team, I understand, but I agree. That's my thing. I watched that first game was the Louisiana Lafayette game, and the first snap he missed a guy running wide open. So there's so much work to be done there. Other guys, just for people who might be interested, Desmond Ridder from Cincinnati and Bailey Zappi from Western Kentucky. I think those guys are rounds 2 to 3 career, and again the highest for rounds 2 to 3. We're looking at a Kirk Cousins potential.
We're not drafting one of those.
We're not drafting.
We covered that before. We're not. If we're going to make the move this year, it's for somebody we are very confident will be, a franchise guy.
I agree. Yeah, we don't. There's no reason for any of this shit.
Mm-hmm.
For those curious about Brock Purdy and if I might have overlooked him, Iowa State quarterback who's very seasoned and play a lot in the NCAA. Overall, I think he's falling somewhere in the 3rd or 4th round. And if anybody likes Carson Strong from Nevada, I have him even further, rounds 4 to 5. I actually, when I was doing Senior Bowl prep work, I was kind of wowed by him. And then I saw him at the Senior Bowl and I dipped back down. And then after more film work, I'm even further down. So that's kind of how I see the quarterbacks shaking out.
Okay.
That's what I've got. That's what I've got for you all.
All right.
That was my exhaustive list of quarterbacks. There's really no need at that point where I'm projecting guys in the 4th and 5th round. I just don't. There's no way the Giants pick a quarterback outside of the 1st round unless somebody insane falls. Right.
My last question relative to the Giants: is there anybody on this list that you could see somebody trading up for to get?
If they're falling, or you mean before the draft starts?
Before the draft starts, they would want one of our picks.
Well, our picks? I don't know if we're close enough to trade before the draft for a quarterback.
Right. So you don't see
on draft day, I mean, I don't think it's falling for a quarterback in this draft class to not be picked in the top 5. I got to be honest. So I could see Corral, Pickett, and Malik Willis all being trade-upable guys if none of them have been picked in the top 5.
Okay.
From some team. I'm not versed enough in the NFL and which teams might want which kind of fucking quarterback.
Somebody's going to make that jump that from the combine to the draft where all of a sudden their stock's going to rise, and happens every year.
And I would say Malik Willis has been steadily having his stock rise since 2020. So, and like I said, even the Senior Bowl, he looked better than he did on 2021 film. So at the combine, he might rock everybody's world.
So somebody's out there is going to be like, I got to get this guy, and could trade up for. Gotcha.
Yeah, and he's also not running at the combine. So his speed, if he runs a 4.2 at his pro day, whenever the hell that is, that's only going to increase.
Right.
Ultimately, before I did this, gun to my head, Giants weren't picking a quarterback. Now I don't even need the gun to my head. I just need somebody near me, and I'll say, anybody walks into a room, I'll just say, the Giants aren't drafting a quarterback this year. So that's where I land on all of this.
Gotcha.
That's going to do it for this episode. I'm glad that you all got to see this, even though we did it way in advance. And we will see you next week. We're doing Kanas, as Dave Gettleman used to say, but as normal humans used to say, corners. Next week is corners.
Very important corners.
Very important corners. We will see you all there. Be sure to follow on YouTube. And if you just like listening instead of watching, sucks for you, but we accommodate Google Play, Spotify, iTunes, SoundCloud, all that. And of course, follow us on Twitter. @ are right below, @football_grump, @the Cranky Fan. We will see you all next time. Go Giants.
Go Giants.